Salutations, respective viewers. I'm George from Ireland. So I'm carrying on about my thoughts about nationalism and how this can lead to denialism. I'm not against nationalism per se. There can be a reasonable level of nationalism. It can be a healthy thing, but like most things, it can be carried to an extreme and it can become negative. Now, how far does it have to go before it's extreme? I can't give an answer to that. It's not something one can easily quantify. Um, So when I'm talking about denialism, I'm talking about claiming things that didn't happen or they actually did. If you deny something which is false, then obviously it's right to deny it. Remember, Tucker Carlson tied himself in knots over this one, saying, climate denier, oh, that's really bad to call me a denier. But wait a second, if you're denying something that really is happening, then being a denier is bad. But if you are denying a falsehood, then you're right to say that it's not actually happening or it never occurred. But I'm talking about in relation to genocide and things like that. Well, the most infamous example is the Holocaust. Although, fascinatingly, the country whose people were mainly responsible for it, Germany, is actually criminalized, claiming that the Holocaust did not occur. So, Germany and Austria, they particularly emphasize it most certainly happened, and they've been very mature and, well, what else can I say? Magnanimous is not quite the right word because obviously it's not their people who are the victims for the most part. Okay, German Jews who say, yeah, well, they really were Germans. In that sense, Germans were victims too. Um, you'll find Holocaust deniers, particularly in other countries, who, for their own racist reasons, are claiming this thing didn't happen, that was a hollow hoax. But that's what's fascinating about it. The people who are really anti Semitic say that it didn't happen, but they should have wanted it to happen because they absolutely detest Jewish people and want them wiped out. But anyway, there are other examples around the world of where your nation, perhaps shouldn't say that because the nation as a whole doesn't do these bad things. People of your nationality have done something ghastly, and other people claim, well, no, that's not the case. Or even that it was a good thing, like white Americans who say that slavery was good for African Americans, they liked it, they were looked after, or something revolting like that. In which case, these whites should actually say, well, please enslave me because it'd be so wonderful. So people tend to trim in favor of their own people, but more and more, saying, well, let's overemphasize the good, let's de emphasize the bad, and all the rest of it. So that it can be a little bit like cutting corners, as it were, but this is in relation to the truth rather than the big lie, and quite often it is an outright lie instead. Wish to present a good image of one's own people. So some of these deniers actually believe the tripe they're saying, but for others it's the noble lie. They know that it's a fallacy, but they say it anyway because they feel that the country is the ultimate good, and in the cause of presenting a positive image of their country, then they must deceive people. So people are not monodimensional, we're obviously multidimensional, we've got good and bad facets to us. And that's one of the things that's problematic about it. Is, a man could be a loving husband and a devoted father, all the rest of it, and still carry out abominable acts. And then if you know the good side of him, what a warm-hearted person he is, it might be then very hard to accept that he's involved in something dreadful. But he's maybe compartmentalized it, persuaded himself that this other category of people are not people, that they don't count, we can do something abysmal to them, or that it's necessary, or that it's not his decision. He's simply a cog in a wheel. Someone else has told him to do it, so he's doing it and getting on with it. Or, abdicating responsibility for this kind of thing. And it happens all over. I mean, people are involved in war, sometimes unjust wars. Oh, well, it's mine not to reason why. Or, well, I'm simply obeying commands given to me. And there's this whole Nuremberg principle that, that's no defense, which would seem to me to be post factum. Now, apparently, the British Army were told before the Second World War you did not have to obey illegal orders. But what's illegal? I mean, soldiers, they're not professors of jurisprudence. How are they to figure this out? Even law professors would argue themselves blue in the face about what's legal and what's not. Especially in the heat of the moment, you can't expect a soldier to be able to know this sort of thing. Um, so they think, well, if I follow orders, then I can't be going too far wrong. And obviously, armies can't function with their barrack room barristers, and lawyers are always arguing the toss over something about, but this debating the legality of commands they're given. So this is why people can get into doing bad things, or often, vengeance. I can't remember which Irish Republican poem this is, saying, "We will strike them back blow for blow. We will pay them back woe for woe." So one of the things they do to program people into being terrorists or whatever is to convince them that their people have been treated with horrific injustice, and the only way to achieve justice is by a resort to force, and that's that, to horrify them, to infuriate them, and speak about all the savage crimes committed against their people, the utter degradation their people have suffered. Like, let's say the Mumbai attacks in 2008, when the guy they captured alive, the terrorist captured alive, he told the Indian police that in Pakistan, the ISI, Inter-Services Intelligence, that's Pakistani intelligence, had taken him and the other recruits of this terrorist organization and shown them videos of these heinous crimes committed against Muslims around the world. So these guys had become absolutely irate and lusting for vengeance because of all this suffering they'd seen. And that's why they became completely ruthless. They showed no compassion to people. They're willing to deliberately kill civilians on a huge scale. They did it to us, so we'll do it back to them. So that's how nationalism can go very badly wrong. So the situations are much easier to deal if we can take the emotion out of them. And so if discussing a controversial episode in the past, if we can not frame it in emotive language, I know that's difficult to do. And even the tone of voice, like I'm speaking in now, being placid, not come across as pointing the finger, not be insulting people, so they can be tranquil and they can discuss it soberly. So people tend to implicitly believe in the truth and soundness of an account which favours their own people. Just reflects credit on them about being civilized, about being morally upstanding, truth-telling, and all the rest of it. And anything which doesn't fit this self-flattering narrative is a slur. So it's congenial to one's impulses and emotions to believe that one's people have achieved so much and not harmed others and blah, 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 always been on the right side of history. So I don't impugn the sincerity of people who believe that. Some of them genuinely believe that. Others of them, well, a few of them know it's false, and others of them might have some doubts about it. So I remember speaking to my German girlfriend years ago about the Allies bombing a train in Germany that her grandmother had been on, and how horrified they were. And obviously civilians got caught in that, and the train wasn't a military train. Well, there were no soldiers on it, and my instinct was to defend that, saying, oh, well, then it could have later on be used for troop transport or something like that. And she said, well, that's almost natural. And actually, I think it was the US Army Air Corps. But being from a country who was on the Allied side, I felt that. But, maybe it was wrong, and you shouldn't just bomb trains at random like that, even in wartime. Looking back at it, had it been the other way around, had the Luftwaffe been bombing a train in the United States or the United Kingdom, would I have felt the same? And probably not. I probably would have said it was unacceptable. So you've got to ask yourself, how would you feel if it was the other way around? If the boot was on the other foot? And if not, well, then you can't justify it the first way around. Okay, because this is applicable principle of of something which is universalizable, as Kant would have said. If you think it's permissible for you to do it, it's permissible for them to do it. So these days, as I said, in the Federal Republic of Germany, many Germans are faced up to the many very wicked things that their army, their government did in the 1940s. Which is not to say that Germans should be mistreated now or should be ashamed now. We could just tell the truth in a dispassionate manner, as they do. And no other people has been so good about facing up to that, and is so civilized since. And remember, after 9/11, the US government tried to twist Germany's arm. Will you please bring in internment, lock people up without trial? We think are terrorists. And the Germans said very firmly, no, absolutely no, no way, under no circumstances. We've been down that road before. That leads to totalitarianism. We will not do that. People will only go to prison here if they're found guilty of a crime. They cannot be locked up on suspicion, no matter how exigent the situation is. So There's not much yearning of power for power or revenge there. Seems as they're proud of their shame, as in that makes them wise and decent people to face up to that. But I don't think they should be ashamed now. Just look at it, obviously face up to the truth and so on. And there are obviously some fabulous things about Germany now, especially in the last few decades. And every country has had dark chapters. So self-loathing is bad; it's a negative emotion, whereas pride is a positive emotion. And the trouble is, I know that pride can turn bad if it makes you proud of things which were ghastly that people from your country did, or it makes you not accept the truth when it's unpalatable. This anti-German bigotry in the United Kingdom in particular, surprisingly not so much in Germany's neighbours who suffered more from the Third Reich. Anyway, so coming on to the EU, and Germany's sort of sublimated its national identity in Germany. Remember, Gerhard Schroeder, the German Chancellor, wouldn't say he was proud to be German, would say he's proud of Germany. And by being part of the EU, Germany thinks we can never go back to the bad old days. We can never be militarists or whatever. Herman Kelly is a guy from Derry in Ireland, Londonderry he wouldn't call it, and he's a nationalist of some stripe, talking about fighting 800 years for independence. It was actually 850 years this year since Strongbow arrived. And he lambasts Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin is the main nationalist party in Northern Ireland. Surprisingly, Sinn Féin, all about Irish unity, is very weak in the Republic of Ireland. It shows how partitionless they are. 2 leaders for either part of Ireland. Well, sorry, 1 leader for the north, 1 leader for the south. And Herman Kelly said that Sinn Féin is the EU Unionist Party, the European Unionist Party, and it's true, because Herman Kelly, surprisingly, he worked for UKIP as a press secretary. He doesn't regard himself as being British. He would like Northern Ireland to leave the UK, join the Republic of Ireland, but also to leave the European Union. What's the point of leaving the UK if you stay in the EU? At least the UK is close by, is smaller. There's a great deal of commonality between Ireland and Great Britain, but the EU is so much bigger and so much more alien, especially the further reaches of it in relation to Ireland. We really don't have very much in common with Slovakia or Bulgaria. So anyway, some say the European Union has protected the Good Friday Agreement in Ireland. Well, although the Good Friday Agreement states that both the Republic of Ireland and UK are members of the European Union, it does not require them to be members of it. And of course, it was chaired by a US Senator, George Mitchell. The Good Friday Agreement talks not by someone from the EU. And in the Treaty of Lisbon, all EU member states granted each other permission to leave any time. So let's not forget that Sinn Féin, they fought tooth and nail against joining the European Economic Community, against joining the European Union and all the European integration. About 20 years ago, they completely changed their mind. Okay, they support it now, but they can't claim that it would be a hostile act to leave the EU, which they did. They wanted the UK, the Republic of Ireland, to leave the EU in the 90s. Anyway, look at Republican Sinn Féin. That's this dissident Republican organisation, political party, but hasn't got anybody elected, and they want a Celtic Confederation, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Brittany, and Cornwall. Well, good luck with that. Only about 1% of people in Cornwall vote for the Cornish Independence Party. Many people in Cornwall are not Cornish. So nations don't have fixed boundaries in time, in space, in ethnicity. I know we do make these boundaries, but obviously they change over time. And so, let's say until the 1940s, almost everybody in the United Kingdom would have been white. We go back to, say, 1600, really everybody in England would have been white. And then, some Indian people and black people started arriving. So that depends what you mean black is. There were certainly black people in England in the Middle Ages, almost without exception men, who married white women. And obviously over several generations, they just disappeared into the white community. Well, you go back to ancient Roman times, people said there were black people in what's now Wales and England, and possibly southern Scotland, as Roman legionaries. But then again, they came from these Roman provinces in North Africa. Were they really black? It depends how black you think someone has to be, so how dark someone's skin have to be. Do they count as really black? See, so these ethnic boundaries are unclear either. and who falls either side of the line? Is there an intermediate category? Now, ethnicity doesn't matter much to me, but it matters very deeply to some people, and I often cross swords with white nationalists online and point this out. So I'm opposed to ethno-nationalism. I believe in an open nationalism, which is open to people of all ethnicities. And there have been Chinese people in the British Isles since 1685. So talk about the EU. Well, even that has its limits, despite being so broad-minded and so welcoming. They rejected Morocco joining. Well, back then the EU was the EEC. In the late 80s, spurned Morocco, but not on the principle that it was not in Europe, that it was across the Straits of Gibraltar. Possibility of Turkey joining, but the attempted military coup probably put paid to that, especially as Erdogan has now got an interesting take on democratic norms. There are more countries with association agreements: Albania, Bosnia, Georgia, and Ukraine. They're supposed to be candidates for membership, but it hasn't happened so far. But is there no limit to where the EU will go? Eventually, we'll say that's enough. Consolidate. We're not going to go any further east. Does it want to be the world tomorrow? Possibly. So look at Ireland. We once divided into several different realms, almost incessantly at war against each other. And there's often a lot of this banging on about the Golden Age before the English came. And a lot of countries have some sort of myth about the halcyon days. Or, as Thomas More wrote, "Great was Erin in days of yore, ere her faithless sons betrayed her." And it was very amusing to hear the Irish Guards Regiment of the British Army playing one of the tunes which was set to one of Moore's poems from his volume Irish Melodies. Thomas More was an early 18th century, or early 19th century Irish poet, though he composed his verses entirely in English. And I can't remember the title of that poem. It might be With Fond Memories of Old Erin, which had that quotation I just gave. So the Irish Guards had no idea they were playing the tune to a Republican ballad, as in suggesting that Ireland, Great Britain should not have any political connection at all, and that Irish people should fight against the British Army. But not so many people are well clued up. Thomas More, well, people tend not to dip into his poesy these days. So we fought against each other, and we fought for pasture and cattle and so on. And then I hear this falsehood: oh, it was much better before the English came, there were no problems here, we never fought each other, which is of course a complete drivel. And the Danes attacked us, and the Danes seized a lot of land and had their kingdom, and obviously we are partly of Danish descent. But scintillatingly, that's been overlooked, and none of us have Danish names. I don't know if we've absorbed Danish words into the Irish language, and none of the toponyms are Danish, so far as I know. Okay, Dublin, Duvlin, as in Dark Bay. Apparently the Danes called it that, or the Norse called it that, but we just simply translated it from their language into Irish. Although in Irish we'd call it Ballyaclea, Featherford Town, or Town of the Ford of the Feather. Anyway, so over time it's as though wrong becomes right, because almost every country is based on conquest, but we overlook that. In Ireland, the larger tribes defeated the smaller tribes and absorbed them, and there were, as I say, the petty kingdoms and the middling-sized kingdoms and a few of the larger kingdoms and the High King at Tara, and people tussled over who should be the High King. There was no dynasty as such. Sometimes a family would manage to get a hold of that and wear the crown for a few generations. But we simply accept these conquests, but some of them people don't accept and still nurse a grudge about it centuries later. It's as though wrong becomes right. Otherwise, you'd have to raise Cain and say, well, we're going to have to undo this wrongful act many centuries ago and go to war over that. Well, you cannot unmake an omelette. You cannot separate the egg and the yolk again. Okay, sometimes a change has been made that which cannot be reversed. We just have to do that. Just have to live with it. So there's selective amnesia and selective memory in relation to nationalism. And you get this in other walks of life, or in relation to what political parties have done and so on. So talk about the Irish passport rule. You can get an Irish passport if one grandparent born in Ireland. This is how nationality is limited in time. And nationality and citizenship, are they the same? Arguably, yes. It's fascinating how in the Soviet Union, they were all Soviet citizens, but they talked about their nationality as in either Russian, Ukrainian, Kazakh, or whatever. Or there's some people who didn't have their own union republic, like Tatars or Bashkirs. and then they can be recognized even within the Russian Federation today, have a degree of autonomy, autonomous regions. So what if you had one great-grandparent born in Ireland? You can't get Irish citizenship. But so that's a cut-off in time in relation to that. And there has to be some sort of cut-off, or not. I mean, the Germans have this blood not soil principle. So I think I'm right in saying if you can prove any German ancestry, no matter how distant, you can get German citizenship. We talked about German cultural spaces in Eastern Europe, well, like in Romania, for instance. And I knew an old man who grew up in Romania, a German, and his family had lived there for centuries, and he was absolutely certain it was German and not Romanian. Same with, say, Volga Germans. Anyway, so there's a nationalism of the periphery, which Christopher Hitchens pointed out, saying the most extreme Irish nationalists are never found in Dublin or even Belfast, more likely Boston or New York. And because they're right, though they're part of the diaspora, they are obviously not so well informed and too eager to prove themselves, and they go in for a maximalist expression of whatever they think the national cause is. And that's that. More Irish than the Irish themselves, to quote Jonathan Swift. And same with, let's say, Hitler being born in Austria, not in Germany. Or British nationalists, the hardline ones, you never find them in London or even Glasgow, possibly Portadown, or maybe the Falklands or something like that. I could go on and on with examples of this. So will nationality in Europe be centered on something different now? It's becoming increasingly multiracial. There's often an ethnic core to the nation, and obviously they're immigrant communities, they can become citizens, and in my view, yes, they are fully part of that nation. Now, they may have some divided loyalties. I hope that's not an unkind thing to say, but let's say British Indians think about the old country too. Doesn't bother me, and it would be a bad thing to say, oh, you have to abandon your traditions. No, you can value both countries. These things are not inimical to each other. They're bringing something to the party. They're making the culture richer and more colourful. So, yeah, European countries are becoming very multiracial. About France, 20% non-white, the UK getting up that way. So perhaps the language is going to be less important to nationality in future, as more and more people speak English. So look in the European Union, countries which don't have English as an official language, but still have most people who can speak excellent English, like the Netherlands and Sweden, for instance. So maybe that won't really matter, language. And you see how the probably EasyJet has done more for the EU than anything else, because ordinary people without much money can afford to fly all around the European Union. So people are becoming increasingly intertwined. So perhaps we shall see the emergence of EU nationalism. Now, the nation state may be held to be in a state of palsied decrepitude. Its era has come and gone. I remember a Eurocrat saying to me it was a nonsense 19th century concept, the nation state. Well, I don't quite agree with her on that, but I realise that nation state was fairly new because obviously it had feudal states beforehand. And what counted as a nation was seen as very different. National identity wasn't quite so strong. Go to places like the Caucasus, and it's very difficult to figure out who's what, an Ingush and a Dagestani, and till the 19th century they often have simply said that they're a Muslim, or have a very localized tribal identity. So it's hard to think of a fair test for real nationality. What is it? So I'm a thoughtful observer of nationality. I don't reject it, and indeed I feel my nationality. Recall how George Bernard Shaw said that nationality should be like bones. You should simply be unconscious of it if you're in a healthy situation. You don't feel them. So perhaps I give it too much thought. So there is cause for complaint with nationalism. It can go wrong. I feel grateful for my nationality because fortunately I was born in a very prosperous part of the world, which made my life a lot easier abroad. But what if I were born in an underdeveloped country? Am I to say that? LEDC? Because it might have said poor in the old days. It seems to be spat out like an insult, so we don't do that. Should I be proud if I was in a very underdeveloped country? Doesn't make me bad. I'm not saying the people are bad, but life is difficult. You might well want to get out. And would I have to honestly believe that this country is fantastic, that it's achieved so much when it hasn't? So people should be broad-minded enough not to have to assume that their country is fantastic, or indeed they think that it's terrible. It may be quixotic to think that we can do without nationality, but I have come across people who say that we should just be internationalists. And Marxists used to be all into that, but they seem to have dropped that one, but it's become less popular. At the same time, they cared about independence of countries and breaking away from colonialism. Why? Empire is at least a step towards world government. What I think might work is a North Sea Confederation. If the European Union wasn't there, if it was like the UK, Republic of Ireland, Netherlands, Sweden, Germany, France, and Belgium, all very affluent countries, all with quite strong historic links, that is something I might agree to. Not a full union, but a confederation. Remember, London was in the Hanseatic League. And go back to the Middle Ages, the Hanseatic League for various Baltic cities, which did a lot of trade with each other, mostly German ones. So nationality cannot be preserved in aspic. It's always evolving. I'm a bit of a rootless cosmopolitan, a xenophile. I fancy myself as a polyglot, but perhaps I delude myself. So those are my uncollected thoughts on nationality and nationalism.